Well, leaving Pittsboro, heading south on 902 toward the Devil's Stomping Ground. Doesn't that sound interesting? This is one of the routes, scenic routes. It's described in the North Carolina Scenic Byways. I'll put a link in the discussion. My idea is to start a new series in which I devote maybe a video to each of these routes that I take, so other people can get an idea of what's available. .902, of course, is one of my favorite routes. Very, very pretty. You have to turn right just ahead to stay on 902. When I used to take this route, I would invariably miss this turn. I'm getting a little wiser. In this route, been on 902 many times, but only as far as where it crosses Highway 22. And the route today takes us a good distance across 22, and that, in fact, the Devil's Stomping Ground's on the other side of 22. So I'll be seeing that for the first time. Fairly windy today, gusty. Added a couple of farkles. Let's see, which one should I mention first? I got in the group buy for the Higdonian Urban Cages back in late June, I guess, when I first bought the bike. And they came this week and I installed them. The quality of the design and the manufacturing is just enough, blows me away. Just absolutely wonderful stuff. This is a small business guy, Chris Higdon, who makes these, and he obviously takes a lot of pride in what he does. Just great stuff. I can remember, I'll tag a photo of the Urban Cages. Wonderful stuff. The second thing, I don't think I mentioned this. Despite my claims that I saw nothing wrong with the seat and the windscreen when I first got the bike, the more I rode it, the more I realized that I was getting beat up by the wind, and my derriere was suffering after an hour or so. So I broke down and I got a Sargent Seat. They really make a wonderful seat, and this is very comfortable. And then to further enhance it, I got an Alaska Leathers lambskin butt pad, which is heavenly soft and comfortable, just a wonderful thing. And on top of the Sargent Seat, just makes a wonderful combination. I should mention that the website for the Alaska Leathers suggest a Pillion 2, I think, is the appropriate size for the FJ09, but of course that's for the stock seat, and I discovered that in fact what you want is a medium if you have a Sargent. That actually fits it very well. Thank you, sir. And the third thing I should mention, I replaced the stock windscreen with a National Cycles Vstream Sport Touring. I had the Vstream Sport Touring on the FJR, but of course that's a very different windscreen, even though it has the same name. But anyway, it's a middle-sized one that's sort of lightly tinted, and you're looking through part of it right now. And it's in the lowest position, and I think it does a really good job. I'm very well pleased with it. And it's made of plexiglass, the stuff they make bulletproof windshields out of. So it's quite tough, quite rigid. There's a lot less flex and vibration in it than there was in the original, so really like that. May have to put it in a higher position in the winter, we'll see. Feels very good now. Well, you see why I love this road. Just nice twisties, beautiful country, hardly any traffic. Crossing the Rocky River. Not much of a view of that. It's not very big at this point. My list of Farkles continues. I had a ram mount hex grip that I'd used for a long time for my iPhone. But the way it was mounted on this bike, the iPhone stuck up and obscured the view of the instrument cluster. And I didn't like that. And the way the X-Grip is designed, people have know this. It's really designed to be used in portrait mode. And when you get vertical jiggles in riding, the acceleration in the vertical direction actually makes the grip the phone harder, just exactly what you want. But I wanted to put the phone in the horizontal position, and people understand that that works just the opposite. You get the vertical jiggles, it actually loosens the grip, and the phone is many people have had the experience of the phone popping out. Not a good outcome. So I didn't want that. And then I found out that there's another small company, Hondo Garage, that makes a thing called a Perfect Squeeze. And I don't know whether you can see it. My iPhone's in it right now. It actually has a low-profile mount that grips the bar, and then there are 4 pegs that actually hold the iPhone in place, and it's in fact incredibly secure in the landscape mode, or portrait for that matter, but I wanted to use it in landscape. It's another one of these things that when you see it, the quality is so good, and the cleverness of design is just so impressive. I mean, it just makes you feel good to just hold the thing and look at it. my face somewhat to my fellow man to see companies like Hondo and Higdonian making the kind of quality products they are. I don't think that there's ever been anything better quality made anywhere. Very impressive stuff. The Hondo Perfect Squeeze is pretty expensive. I think it's $115, something like that, with the low profile grip. But, you know, my phone costs a lot more than that, and I feel totally secure in having it, and it's in such a perfect position. It's just completely out of the way, perfectly visible, a little closer, which is not bad for my old eyes. One of these days I'm going to have to do a review of Scenic Navigation app, which is what I use all the time now. This is another thing that is just so well done and so much easier to use than the other things I've tried in the past. That again, you get that kind of warm glow feeling about people doing things the right way and making extremely good products. I'll put a link to that too, although I've talked about it before. Can never get a very good image when I'm riding because the wide field of view in the Sony camera really doesn't show it to any great advantage. But it is the display is designed in such a way that you can just glance at it and you see exactly at the top in very bold letters. It's telling me right now that the next thing coming up is in 15 miles, and I go straight at that point. So just a glance is all it ever takes. It also tells me my estimated time of arrival, how far I have to go to complete my trip. It's very easy to create routes as curvy road options, that kind of thing. Very intuitive. You can make the route do exactly what you want, loop back on itself, no problems at all. Save the routes. You can actually publish them, and you can download routes that other people have created. You can text or email yourself a GPX file that is describes the route, can be used in Google Maps or that kind of thing. Just a fabulous program. And the last particle that I haven't mentioned before is I got the SWMotec Evo Engage tank bag. Replaced the Cortec that I had been using. The Cortec, of course, had the magnetic mounting, and it hadn't damaged the tank yet, but I was a little concerned that repeated use with it would scratch the tank. And it was just a little bigger than what I really needed, and didn't look very attractive on the bike. And the SWMotec Evo Engage looks like it was actually made for the bike. Now I can actually see the induction loop in the pavement here. Whether I got over it or not is another issue. And one thing that I notice that's not positive, of course it's nothing that can be changed without destroying the advantage of the bike is that the FJ09 doesn't seem to want to trip the North Carolina induction loops. And I can't tell whether I tripped that one or the guy across the way. Anyway, back to the tank bag. It really looks like it was made for the FJ09. It just fits perfectly, follows the contour of the tank. And it's got a ring that attaches permanently to the gas cap. And then the tank bag just clicks onto this ring. So there's no magnetic, there's no straps, there's nothing in it. It's very secure mounting. Easy on, easy off. Of course, only off when you want it to be. You have to pull the strap to release the lock. There's even a way to use a pin, pull pin, inside the bag through a hole in the bottom into the mounting thing. This is designed that way. When that pin's in place, the strap won't disengage the lock. And then you can use a luggage lock on the zippers. It's made for that too. So the tank bag can't be opened and can't be removed without somebody doing some damage to it anyway. So it's enough to discourage a casual thief, opportunistic. So that's all very nice too. It's a little smaller than the Cortec. It's the perfect size for a water bottle and snacks, and cover to put over the instrument cluster when I'm leaving it out in the sun. Cable lock for my helmet. Just what I need. Wallet. Even though I can leave it on the bike, I typically don't. Normal drill. It's got a very convenient carry handle, so I just take my phone off, stick it in the tank bag, take the tank bag with me. That was Highway 421 we crossed back there, and I was talking about the induction loop. I never used to think about those things until I got the FJ09. Now there's a very annoying light on a road that I take all the time where Farrington crosses Highway 64, and I've never been able to trip that. Now I may have a better shot by virtue of the Higdonian Urban Cage. It's got a skid plate on the bottom, and there's some, I think, 18 pounds of steel, something like that, in the whole setup. So that may be just enough mass to push me over the threshold. I also have bought a little, forget the brand name type. Anyway, it's a permanent rare earth magnet. It's 3 inches long by ½ inch by ½ inch. Little rectangular prism. And it's totally got 71 pounds of pull traction. And there's, of course, a whole literature. People who think that magnets will affect these induction loops. A moving magnet, that is. magnet on your bike moves through the induction loop field, will trigger the detection. And there are people that think that that's totally ridiculous, and that anybody that believes that's a total idiot. I don't know which of the two positions is right, but if the mass of the Higdonian Urban Cage is not enough to make a difference, then I'm going to try out the magnet and just see for myself. I was reading this one discussion between supporters and detractors of the magnet's work view, and I was just amazed at how venomous the conversation got. I mean, this isn't even politics. And gee, I wish we could all get to be a little more tolerant of people who don't think exactly the same way that we do. That's a goal of mine anyway. I'm trying real hard. I hope I'll live long enough to see some semblance of civility return to our general and public discussions. I think we're about 8 miles or so from where 902 runs into Highway 22. And we'll of course continue across, but I believe the road changes name on the other side of 22. Howard Mill Road, something like that, I think. What a nice day to be up for a ride, my gosh. Got the whole of fall to look forward to, my absolute favorite time of year. The end of the really hot, humid weather, crisp days, low humidity, crystal clear views, and of course the leaves changing. Stopped there for gas a couple of times. You can see from these flags ahead what kind of crosswinds we've got today. When I first started riding again, the winds really bothered me. In fact, lots of times if the weather was nice but the wind was blowing, I just wouldn't ride. And I don't know what the difference is, but I've sure gotten a lot more relaxed about it. Knock on wood. It don't seem to bother me at all now. I think growing up in West Texas, wind wouldn't be an issue for me. The average wind velocity, I was told once in Amarillo where I grew up, was 35 miles an hour. That may be a little high, but it wouldn't be unusual to have winds like that routinely in the afternoon. In fact, story I remember when I was still in high school, my dad was in business, and the idea came up that it might be a good idea if somebody in the family knew how to fly. That was a pretty good way of getting around in the high plains of Texas. And so my parents arranged for me to have flying lessons, so I learned how to fly, got my private pilot's license, single engine rating, and then eventually multi-engine rating. And anyway, so I was out at the little airport in Amarillo, it's called Trade Winds, one day, and I was inside one of the hangars talking to somebody about something, and there was a big commotion outside. People were hollering and laughing, and a lot of noise going on. So we went outside to see what the fuss was about. And here's a whole group of people, all standing facing the same way, looking up in the sky. And I thought, what the heck are they looking at? Have they seen a flying saucer or something? And we walked over and got behind them, tried to look in the same direction they were, and I couldn't see anything that looked particularly worth noticing, until it finally dawned on me there was an anemometer, you know, one of the wind gauges, on top of one of the hangars, and it was standing absolutely still. And nobody in this group, and they were discussing this by this point, and there were some pretty old guys in this group, nobody had ever seen that. So that makes you appreciate the normal state of the winds in the high plains. Of course, the common expression there, the only thing between Amarillo and the North Pole is one barbed wire fence. And that again was an expression of what a nice area it was for the winds to transist without any interference. Just finished reading a book. Thinking about the Texas Panhandle reminded me of this. Called Empire of the Summer Moon by a person named Gwynne, Gwynne. It's the story of the war between the Comanches and the Texas Rangers and the federal government cavalry troops that began in the mid-1830s and continued for, I think, 40-something years, ended in the late 1870s. Just an amazing story, and a lot of the action takes place in a place called the Llano Estacado, which is the high plains of the Texas Panhandle, New Mexico, Colorado, that area. And in the Palo Duro Canyon, which is right on the edge of the Llano Estacado. Now this is Highway 22. This is the crossing. So I've not been beyond this point before. Of course, the Palo Duro Canyon is not far from Amarillo. Right, I think it's like 15-20 miles, something like that, from Amarillo, where I grew up. And Amarillo is right in the middle of the Llano Estacado. Now the main character in the book, I guess, is Quanah Parker. And Quanah Parker was the son of a Comanche chief and a white woman named Cynthia Ann Parker, who had been kidnapped in 1836 from her home near Dallas. Most of the rest of her family were killed at the time in this raid. Cynthia Ann Parker became kind of famous because she actually liked, evidently, the Comanche way of life more than what the settlers were experiencing during that period. So she evidently really loved this chief that she married, and she had 3 children. Quanah was the oldest, and she loved all of them very much. Cynthia Ann was her kidnapping was effectively regarded as the start of this war that lasted for 40 years. She was rescued, not to her mind, but to those who did it, about, maybe 20 years after she was taken. She and the youngest child, a daughter, were rescued. Her husband was killed, and she thought her 2 sons had been killed in this raid, but she wasn't sure about that. And she tried for many years to escape and get back and find out about her husband and be with their children if they were still alive, but she was never able to. A lot of people think that her rescue was a lot sadder event in her life than when she was kidnapped in the first place. Some of the final battles in this war took place near the Red River and the Palabura Canyon area, and Quanah Parker became the chief of one of the most important and recalcitrant branches of the Comanches. And he was a very smart guy. In fact, the author makes it pretty clear that Quanah would have been a success at any time in the history of the world in almost any capacity. Anyway, he was the last holdout, and then when he realized that there was just no point to carrying on, all the buffalo had been killed, there was no way for these Plains tribes to sustain the kind of life that they had known. He brought his band in to the reservation in Oklahoma and immediately decided to be a success on the reservation and to do whatever was necessary. Quanah was one of these guys that, well, he was just an incredible optimist. It didn't matter what happened to him. He thought tomorrow could be better than today, and he would devote all his energies to figuring out how to make that happen. And as I say, he was a very smart guy, so he usually figured out how to do it. Well, he became a successful rancher there on the reservation. He had a big spread, had a lot of horses and cattle, and he became fairly prosperous. Eventually built a big 10-room house, which would have been the pride of any of the pioneers in those days. And he had, I think, 7 or 8 wives and 20-something children. And he was beloved by everybody in his tribe. In fact, when he eventually died, 1910, something like that. He was pretty near broke, and that's because he used all his cattle to feed tribes members that were hungry or destitute, help people. He just, whatever he could do to help others, he did. Wonderfully impressive guy for a guy who'd been a stone killer at one point to quite a humanitarian at another point. His book is just an amazing story. There are lots of other interesting characters. There's a guy named Mackenzie who was a classmate of Custer at West Point, whereas Custer graduated last in his class and set a record for the most demerits ever awarded to a student there. Old Mackenzie was #1 in his class, and another brilliant guy. In the Civil War, he impressed Grant as being the best junior officer in the Army, and he got I think 7 brevet promotions during the Civil War, wound up a major general at the end of the war. And it's interesting, Custer of course is famous by virtue of his disaster at Little Bighorn. Mackenzie, on the other hand, is the guy that actually defeated the Comanches and won the Indian War. And nobody's ever heard of him. Go figure. Charles Goodnight is another character who is famous, at least in the area of Texas that I grew up. He had been a Texas Ranger, fought, of course, in the Indian Wars, and then he went partners with a guy named John Adair to form the form the J.A. Ranch. I think J.A. stood for John Adair. Goodnight was a full partner in that. And that ranch was located in the Palo Duro Canyon. They used the canyon kind of as a natural fence. And of course there was water in the canyon from the river that flowed through it. Prairie Dog Fork of the Red River, I think, if I remember right. And so there's actually a family connection here. My great-grandfather moved from Tennessee into Texas in the 1840s, something like that. And then his son, my grandfather, migrated from Tennessee into North Texas, an area above Dallas and near the Oklahoma border in the 1870s. And then eventually came west to an area that was called Mulberry Flats, that was actually near the headquarters of the J.A. Ranch in the Palo Duro Canyon. And my father was actually born on the J.A. Ranch in 1901. So my grandfather and then my grandfather actually was there during the time of the end of the Comanche War. And my father, of course, grew up in that country, while Quanah Parker was still alive, and the Indians were all on the reservation at that point, but it was still pretty wild country. And so it's just amazing to me to read this book and hear all this from the perspective of these other folks that were involved in all this. Better concentrate on figuring out how to get back home at this point. Enough talk anyway. Hope you enjoyed the narrative and the scenery. See you next time.